sick and tired of hearing things from uptight, short-sighted, narrow-minded hypocrites. All I want is the truth. Just give me some truth. I've had enough of reading things by neurotic, psychotic, big-headed politicians. All I want is the truth. Just give me some truth.
Welcome to CounterPunch Radio. I am your program producer, Nathaniel St. Clair, and today's episode is brought to you in partnership with Verso Books. You know Verso. They have been publishing important works of theory, history, philosophy, and criticism from the left for over 50 years. A recent title of theirs that I highly recommend is The Master's Tools: How Finance Wrecked Democracy and a Radical Plan to Rebuild It, by Michael A. McCarthy. Why is democracy so broken, and how might it be fixed? This book argues the answer can be found in the flows of credit and investment bound up with finance capital. Today, finance guides and constrains our politics, but there is no reason why this must be so. McCarthy has developed a political and social theory of institutional transformation rooted in the interconnectedness of finance and democracy. Inspired by ancient Athens, where small groups chosen by lottery were used to ensure democratic participation, he shows how democracy and working class power can be strengthened by introducing new forms of financial governance, focusing on the inclusion of historically excluded groups. You can find the master's tools at versobooks.com, where CounterPunch Radio listeners can save 20% by using discount code COUNTERPUNCH at checkout. All right, on today's episode, Erik Wallenberg and Joshua Frank welcome Vijay Kolinjivadi and Vansintjan to the show to discuss their new book, The Sustainability Class: How to Take Back Our Future from Lifestyle Environmentalists. Yes, this is a book about those wealthy, progressive urbanites convinced that we can save the planet through individual action, smart urbanism, green finance, and technological innovation. Vijay and Aaron are challenging many of the popular ideas about environmentalism and are showing that it is actually the sustainability class that is unstable, how its solutions are safeguarding an elite minority while excluding billions of people, and are ultimately hastening ecological breakdown, not reversing it. They cover all that in depth in this conversation, as well as some examples from around the world of ways we can actually save the planet. But before we get to that, I need to give you a peek at the paid portion of our website and remind you that becoming a CounterPunch Plus member is the best way to support our publication. What you will find there isn't bonus content, it isn't fluff, it's first-rate, hard-hitting investigative journalism. For example, this riveting piece by Ray Atchison titled The Tech Broligarch Nightmare. Here's a snippet. As tech bros disassemble the government with assistance from artificial intelligence, they are building both the world they want and the weapons to secure it. While some might find legitimate merit in the disassembly of the U.S. government, which has operated as an imperialist warmonger for more than a century, while generating vast inequalities and repression at home, the concerns expressed here are not about defending what was, but are about what is being built in its place, and who is building it, and what harms they are producing now and intend to inflict moving forward. End quote. Now, if you don't have the means to become a member at the moment, another way to really help us grow this show is to simply subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating and review on whatever platform you use to listen. All of that is surprisingly important, so we greatly appreciate the support. All right, let's get to what you came here for. Erik and Joshua in conversation with Vijay Kolinjivadi and Vansintjan.
Sick and tired of hearing things from uptight, short-sighted, narrow-minded hypocrites. All I want is the truth. Just give me some truth. I've had enough of reading things by neurotic, psychotic, pig-headed politicians. All I want is the truth. Just give me some truth.
Welcome to CounterPunch Radio. This is Joshua Frank, broadcasting from Long Beach, California. I'm joined today by my co-host, Erik Wallenberg in Chicago. And we're really excited to have the authors of a new book, which I highly recommend, called The Sustainability Class: How to Take Back Our Future from Lifestyle Environmentalists. Vijay Kolinjivadi is an assistant professor at the School for Community and Public Affairs at Concordia University in Montreal. He is the co-editor of the website Uneven Earth. His work has been published in Truthout, Al Jazeera, The Conversation, and other publications. Vansintjan writes about food, cities, politics, and ecology. He is also co-founder of Uneven Earth, a website that focuses on ecological politics. He has been published in The Guardian, Red Pepper, Truthout, openDemocracy, The Ecologist, and other publications. He's also the co-author of a great book called The Future Is Degrowth, A Guide to a World Beyond Capitalism, which was published by Verso. They join us from Montreal. Vijay and Aaron, welcome to CounterPunch Radio.
Thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, we're excited to have you today. In your introduction and throughout the book, you take us to the streets of Venice, California, which over the past decade has transformed into this eco tech bro meets Hollywood utopia. Venice has become this sort of fortified conclave. It wasn't always this way in Venice, as you write. It used to be more economically mixed and culturally eclectic. Nonetheless, something has changed really dramatically there. And as you have argued, not all of those changes have been for the better. So I was wondering if you could discuss your time in Venice, and in doing so, explain what you mean by the label that you use to describe what you witnessed there, the sustainability class, and what that means for Venice and what it means in relation to environmentalism more generally.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Interestingly, when we were pitching this book and thinking about, lifestyle environmentalists, we were really supported. We were pushed by our publisher, you should go to Venice. You have to go to Venice. That's where it's at. That's like the heart and soul of this sort of sustainability lifestyle that you're trying to explore. It's really in Venice. And so we actually strangely went to Venice looking for ecology, thinking that was the place where one could go to find these sort of ecological relationships. We knew, of course, that this was not the case, but we had like sort of an open mind about it. And yeah, I think just being there, speaking to a lot of people who are influencers, also knowing a little bit about the history, knowing about how the sort of urban landscape had transformed over time, particularly around the canals and in some of the communities just within Venice, and then walking around on Abbot Kinney Boulevard and seeing that kind of this sort of sustainability wellness lifestyle really, really coming clear. I think it helped us just talking to some influencers, talking to some people who were involved in making Venice greener in some way. Some of them were involved in landscaping. Some of them were really involved in vegan food and pushing a kind of food revolution. So talking to them, we got this better idea of where that sort of ecological spirit is coming from. What does it actually mean? And that helped us to really just reflect more deeply or think more deeply about what's amiss. Something is amiss about all of this. And it's more than just consumption. It's also this vibe, this for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I think maybe like very indicative of this vibe is from recent news, actually, with the LA fires. You had this store, Erewhon, which is basically a luxury sustainable store that, following the fires, they launched a smoothie called LA Strong. And it And their smoothies, when you buy them, are like $20 or something like that, and they can contain like all kinds of fancy ingredients. But this one was like basically to raise money for people who were affected by the fires. And it's just this idea that you can have a sustainable smoothie that is a response to these fires. Meanwhile, they in the Palisades neighborhood nearby, their location there, they have a few locations in LA, was miraculously saved because this billionaire real estate owner of the land like was able to hire um basically freelance firefighters from Arizona just to protect this one shopping mall. And it just shows this like super stark divide between you have this high-end luxury supermarket that almost no one can shop at. It's super expensive and they offer like all kinds of sustainable products. And then they get protected from these fires by basically mercenaries who are paid for by this billionaire owner. But the fires themselves are also a cause and are also a result of this kind of sustainable lifestyle, which is basically a high-end type of lifestyle that doesn't actually address any of the problems that they claim to address and end up making things worse.
Yeah, and I think maybe to add, one of the things that we just, not only in Venice, I think, but even going around beyond Venice, but elsewhere in Los Angeles, just learning a bit more about the sort of environmental or sustainability policy orientation of the city, like with technological innovation, bike lanes, the metro, and the impacts that had on particular neighborhoods, and speaking to people across the city and just seeing the sort of impacts of where this whole sustainability sort of push is coming from, and even talking to people who told us you have to go to Echo Park Lake, for example. You need to go to these neighborhoods that are the height of green living and a sustainable future. And when we did a little bit more digging, we discovered what was sort of at the expense of that sort of green development, and particularly the uprooting of people, the lack of affordability of housing, and the sort of desire to to like to make to renovate, to create this image in rejuvenating urban landscapes in ways that actually create new exclusions for people.
Yeah, so then to get to the last part of your question is what is the sustainability class? It's basically a class of well-meaning middle class, upper middle class, or upper class people who are often highly educated and have disposable income, and they care about the environment. But what ends up happening is that the solutions that they pursue to address environmental issues end up doing very little to challenge their own class position. And yeah, we can go a bit more into that in our conversation, but that's in brief how we define the sustainability class.
Yeah, it would be great to have you say some more about that, because in reading, I think it's so interesting. I found myself early on thinking, how much is this the latest iteration of yuppie gentrification, and how much of this is something new and different? And I think you do show quite a bit of this. I think you have a good argument around this question of the sustainability class, who they are. And I think an important part of the argument to me seemed to be that this green lifestyle, or so-called green lifestyle people are promoting, is actually worse than neutral. That it's not just it's benign and you care and you're doing something, but that it actually has negative impact. So I was wondering if you might say something just about that, a little bit more about who this class is, and maybe just who you wrote the book for, or who you envision as your audience for this book in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So the term sustainability class, it actually kind of riffs off of this other term that people might be familiar with, is the creative class. And that's the hipsters, the yuppies that we might be familiar with, that you grew up any time after, if you were around the 90s, 2000s, like this, people were talking about this a lot, but basically it's this class of people that supposedly were revolutionizing urban living, that were making urban spaces more creative, than attracting investment and making cities better. The creative class promoting this concept actually made cities more unequal. But now, with this fascination with environmentalism, it's become actually something that, let's say, real estate developers realize that they can make a lot of money on, because people care about environmentalism. So it's become creative class plus sustainability. And then we have the sustainability class. It's around the world, like the creative class. Cities like Singapore, Hong Kong, Shanghai, they all were remodeling their urban development to attract the creative class. And the same now is happening with sustainability. It's becoming like another way to attract investment and then attract a very well-meaning group of people who do have money to spend, but don't exactly know what to do with it.
Yeah, and maybe to add, I think with growing environmental crises around the world, awareness about climate change, this has become a new investment strategy, the state especially, but also across the board. It's like this is an opportunity for investment. And that's literally how it's framed. And so that's why when we really expounded a little bit more deeply on the sustainability class, we thought we realized there's like very interrelated, but three sort of streams that are very closely intertwined with how we might characterize this class. So one is, as what we saw in Venice, very clearly this sort of lifestyle choice, this very vibey attitude of here are, you feel it. You don't even need to explain it. Everyone knows. They can look at each other in that particular place and know that the aesthetics are so specific around plants you'll always have hanging plants, you'll always have particular types of aesthetics that draw some sort of connection to nature and or to the environment. So you have this kind of, lifestyleism. And then you have what we call them, they're called the eco-modernists. So they're those who really believe the sort of Promethean view that technology will address all of our problems and that it's the enlightened human mind that is going to win at the end of the day. And so it's just a matter of being innovative, improving the efficiency of existing technologies and inventing new kinds of new technologies to be able to overcome every single problem, including planetary boundaries and things. And then the third class is what we call the green administrators. They often work within systems, policy, but also the sort of climate circuit, the climate conference circuit, but also academics often find themselves in this role. It's this very sort of mainstream liberal, let's say, liberal politics of we can change things by changing the discourse and creating new terms and ideas that can become investable and that they can slowly or incrementally result in significant change. But we've seen that over a 30-year period, especially just looking at the climate COPs, looking how these conferences have become increasingly co-opted by oil and gas and have yet maintained this kind of posture about these new and latest buzzwords and terms that will somehow take us closer to the sort of goal that we're trying to seek, but yet we're always just producing more content in a way, in a sense. And so there's that whole element of what we call the green administrators. And there's a lot of professional and managerial classes that fall within that role. We don't even know exactly what it is that we're trying to transform, but we end up playing along that green administrator role. So those are the sort of three distinctions, but these are obviously not mutually exclusive. In some cases, you see all of them taking place at once. You see them happening. You see certain technologies and promotion of specific technologies taking place in climate discussions at the same time as you see those aesthetics in those same spaces. So you see all of this at once.
Yeah, and I would just add that what brings all of these together, it's whether it's a belief in that your lifestyle is going to make a difference, or that technology is going to make the difference, or that just setting up the right using the right academic language is going to make a difference, is that it's none of it challenges their own class position. It's all things that they can do within their class position, but they don't have to give anything up, and they don't have to actually make their solution accessible to anyone else. We just take them at their word, and like the solution to the environmental problem is that you buy the right stuff. That is a just already an absurd idea, because most people can't buy the right stuff. So that means most people can't be environmental, but that's just an absurd idea to start with. And then same with technology. If the solution is technology, most people don't even have around the world don't have access to these technologies that they're promoting. And if that's the solution, then you're actually leaving almost everyone behind. Yeah, it's just when you're in it, it sounds very rational and reasonable, but when you take a step back and you think, whoa, this actually doesn't pertain to most people in the world, then it's like, well, is that even environmentalism?
I would just add in the academic circle or in the green administrator circle, you just have the circulation of terms and ideas that are completely divorced from people's lived realities or ways of understanding them. So they become jargon, they become just forms of elitism that then actually just accentuate existing inequalities in society and create new excuses for people to be fragmented. It actually causes fragmentation in society when we really should be much closer and thinking about how we can communicate and understand and feel the shared realities that we're living through.
You strengthen your criticism of the sustainability class by not only talking about consumption and these market choices as far as what to buy at Erewhon or your smoothies or your organic Cheetos, but you also go into mentioning things like cap and trade and these market-based climate schemes that are used as greenwashing, or should I say guilt washing, for those that can afford it. I was wondering if you could discuss the carbon market and why people buy into it, and maybe some other examples that fit into this argument.
Yeah, so one example that we talk about is if you buy an airplane flight, sometimes they ask you, do you want to offset your flight? And what that usually means is that company then hires another company which then invests in another company, which then plants some trees somewhere. But when you actually look at all these tree planting projects, which are massive and all around the world, but usually in places where peasants or indigenous people live, most of them don't even last long. They're called ghost forests. The trees die because it's a monoculture. They're poorly maintained. Often they burn down. That happens now a lot. Basically, you have these monoculture plantations that then are affected by massive fires and then actually add to the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. So yeah, those are solutions that are often proposed on an individual level, but they're also proposed on a global level. You have massive investments in these kinds of cap and trade schemes where companies and countries can basically trade in carbon credits, which allows them to, and billions of dollars gets moved around this way, which allows them to basically claim that they're green when they are continuing all the activities that they're doing. They're just buying, let's say, some forest somewhere.
Yeah, I would add that ideally, well, in a cap and trade market, in a cap and trade situation, you would have a cap that would be enforced. So that means you cannot exceed that much emissions, and then that cap would get tightened over time. The amount of emissions that you could release would drop. But what we're seeing in a lot of these cap and trade markets is just trades and investment in these offsets, but the cap itself is not being enforced. So even if it was to work according to how it is designed, it does not. We give the example of if you had a partner, let's say, and it's like this cheat neutral, this idea called cheat neutral, where every time you cheat, you can offset your cheating on your partner with some sort of credit that you purchased. And that somehow neutralizes the fact that you cheated, and your partners are supposed to accept that. And then that's supposed to be, you can just continuously trade while you are deteriorating qualitatively with your partner, but that doesn't matter in this logic. It's just, and the same thing can be said for the earth. We use the example of a Jenga tower where we're constantly removing fundamental pieces of the tower blocks. We're removing these blocks and putting them on the top. But every time we do this, we're actually destabilizing the very foundation. We cannot replace, there are no equivalencies for tropical forests that are replaced with monocultures. That is fundamentally not possible, no matter what kind of sophisticated carbon accounting that you can do about how many units of carbon were sequestered. The ecological impact of this is so substantial that, so putting that in context, these systems create new investment strategies, essentially, not only for public relations, but also for a bunch of spin-off companies who undertake a lot of very dubious practices. We don't know where these forests are being replanted. We don't know under what conditions they have been negotiated with the people that actually live there. There's all kinds of very nebulous details. And then a recent scandal that was uncovered by the Guardian newspaper revealed that many of these carbon offsets were occurring on land that was not in danger of being deforested in the first place. So then the question becomes, are these offsets actually resulting in any fundamental change at all? Yeah, so when we started to look at some of the policies that the green administrators were pushing forth, like carbon offsets, like cap and trade, then we started to see a lot more problems that have been revealed that just don't make sense when you look at the evidence.
And they're often used in lieu of actual regulation, right? We have cap and trade. We don't actually have to really look at regulating things, right? We'll let the market take care of it, which has led us down this path in the first place.
Yeah, and just to think a little bit more about the failure of the market, I think the other end of this middle-class lifestyle environmentalism that you talk about is the eco-modernists. So both seem to think we can use the market or pre-existing structures to deal with environmental crises. And hopefully that's fair to say for what you all are arguing here. But I think that with tech billionaires literally in the White House just this week, right, where we've been getting the pictures and the videos in, this brand of environmental politics, I don't even know if you can call it environmental politics, is likely to become the dominant one in a lot of ways. And I think it's worth noting that you all identify Greenland as a site of new investment. So again, very timely as we're thinking about the US play to turn Greenland into the red, white, and blue land, apparently. You write about Bezos and Gates and Bloomberg and a bunch of others' interest in some islands and some areas around Greenland, in particular looking for rare earth minerals and metals. And I guess I just would like to hear you all talk a little bit about this. Is this why we're hearing so much about Greenland right now? Could you say a little bit more about the eco-modernists in this moment?
Yeah, okay, so it is the interest in Greenland now that Trump has is because it has some of the largest deposits in the world of rare minerals. And even though Trump is a climate change denier, he knows full well the power of profit, and electric vehicles in particular are becoming extremely profitable. And yeah, it has really, so Greenland has really massive deposits of nickel and cobalt. And already before Trump's administration, yeah, you had billionaires like Bill Gates and Bloomberg and Bezos already investing in these kind of ventures. There's this one venture fund called Blue Jay Mining that they were already investing in. And that is just basically what Trump's interest is here. That is like where his interest is coming from, because rare earth minerals are massively profitable now, and especially now as the ice is melting. So yeah, we talk about Greenland as we joke about it in the first chapter that you can turn any problem into a solution for the eco-modernists. Any problem is a solution. But yeah, climate change is melting the glaciers. Might as well start mining what's under it so that we can power our renewable energy transition.
Yeah, and actually, as I mentioned was earlier, climate change is seen as an opportunity. So the sort of bizarre, coincidence of all these things taking place in a way also just coincides with the fact that there's navigable passageways through Greenland that can make shipping potentially much more efficient, let's say, and that the time to be able to traverse around the world could potentially be much shorter. So Greenland all of a sudden now has, because of climate change, is now seen as a massive economic benefit from that respect as well. So you have just a number of factors at play. And we actually give this example of a company, I think it's a Danish company that called Arctic Ice. It's a startup that is basically mining the ice in Greenland and from its melting glaciers and transporting them to cocktail bars in Dubai and doing so sustainably. So this is all framed as kind of a sustainable way of, it's mind-blowing how you can have a trade like that could be, and this is something that we really talk about in the book. We can have efficient ski resorts in the desert. You can have an efficient supply chain of mining Greenland ice for cocktail bars in Dubai in comparison to another supply chain that's less efficient. So that's how sustainability is being understood in this very, very narrow and very convoluted, actually, way. It's like we don't even step back to see what's really going on. We can promote yachts that are sustainable. We can have golf courses that are sustainable. And that's just absolutely absurd to what is the spirit behind the kinds of transformative change we need.
We'll get into some of the changes that we need. And I was reading the section in your book about Boyle Heights, which is an area here in East LA, as the fires were raging here in LA. And as most people know, there's really two fires going on at the same time. There was one in the Pacific Palisades and then one in this neighborhood of Altadena. And as you mentioned, Palisades is predominantly wealthy, while Altadena, on the other hand, is much more diverse and middle class, working class, with a historic Black population. And the response to these disasters, much like the demographics, were totally different, right? You have a high-end grocery store selling smoothies on one end, and then on the other end, you have actual mutual aid on the ground in Altadena, helping people out, even though the National Guard was surrounding it and trying to, quote unquote, protect property from looters. But the mutual aid effort was really inspiring, I think. And reading your chapter on Boyle Heights, I was captivated by that because you juxtapose it with what was happening in Venice, right? Venice is wealthy, much more wealthy, well-to-do, and Boyle Heights is much more working class. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so we actually also like to compare more concretely. There's the Arts District, which is basically right across the river from Boyle Heights. And we also went there. And I think those kind of art galleries were seen as maybe a continuation of the Arts District right nearby. And it's this whole district that has been taken over and art washed and also greenwashed with lots of these warehouses that now house all these startups. And one particular organization that we were interested in was the LA Clean Tech Incubator. And we actually did a tour there and asked the person working there, what is the most inspiring project that you see going on here? And she had to think for a while, and she was like, I really like this one recyclable straw startup that we're doing here. And so that's kind of the scale that we're talking about. And then we basically crossed the river and went into Boyle Heights, which is predominantly Latino and Latina neighborhood, where the vision of environmentalism is completely different. For them, environmentalism is about building relationships with each other in resistance. So for them, that a lot of what they do is, for example, they do tenant organizing. They organize whole buildings. And they also organize, they mostly work with people, Latino people, but they also have started organizing buildings that are like more gentrifiers because they also have issues with landlords. Then they throw these parties, these movie screening nights, these big festivals in the alleys with food and everything. And for them, it's all part of basically building relationships of solidarity in the neighborhood, getting to know each other, and then actually building power. Because once you get to know each other, once you're able to come together, you can start resisting the landlords, resisting the police, criminalizing their kids, resisting a lot of these gentrification projects coming into the neighborhood, but also proposing a different kind of environmentalism that's based on providing resources that everybody needs. And so, for example, like clean water, there's one case, this is where I'm talking here about this organization called the Unión de Vecinos, the Union of Neighbors. They went into a neighboring community and who had been complaining about basically highly polluted water. And so they worked with the community instead of going in and doing some environmental assessments, this and that. What a lot of NGOs will do is they said, no, this community, like we're going to support them to organize themselves, run for the city council. And then when they run for city council, actually the water company into a municipally owned water company. So it was just kind of, they flipped the whole thing on its head. They said, no, the way we're going to do this is by organizing together and building power and then taking over and then buying out the polluter and doing it ourselves. And they were actually very successful in that strategy. And it's similar to how they approach the issue of housing rights. I think it also just gets down to what is a maybe like fundamental message of our book, which is that environmentalism isn't like, it might appear that environmentalism is about the things that you buy, about buying things that are more pure, where they're coming from, but housing is environmentalism. Building power in your neighborhood, that's environmentalism. But building resources that are accessible to everybody, that's environmentalism.
Yeah, one thing that was interesting that the Unión de Vecinos did in Boyle Heights is when there were trees planted in the neighborhood, they saw them as, because the focus, their understanding of environmentalism is so much rooted in relations and relationships. The tree by itself didn't have like that relationship with their neighborhood. It was just planted by the city. And so what they did was organize committees to build benches around or underneath the tree, and then they were painted, murals were painted on the benches by children, and in a way then kind of socializing the tree, that it becomes something that is rooted in their neighborhood and has meaning for their neighborhood and is part of them in a way. And so it's not just tree planting by itself, it's like making life, creating life in which people in the neighborhood are part of it, and that benefits their well-being as well. And it's obviously that can happen the other way around as well, where it's like this kind of strategy is a way to hollow out a neighborhood and make it appear as though it is like all kind of selling that vibe. But this wasn't a vibe, it was like owned. It was owned by the residents of Boyle Heights. And it was like, no, this is for us and this is what we do, rather than here is a vibe or an aesthetic that we want to sell.
Well, and as you mentioned, trees, I don't think a lot of people know this, but in a lot of cities, tree plantings are sort of a precursor to development and gentrification too. So I really appreciated you pointing that out in Boyle Heights, how they've, in a way, they've subverted that and said, yeah, we are totally for tree planting, but we're going to do it in a different way that benefits the community. That was really, really powerful. And also with bike lanes, right? You mentioned how they're not opposed to bike lanes, but doing it in a way that isn't just for a new class of people moving into their neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if we might just end thinking a little bit about, I think you all have a really capacious understanding of what environmentalism is, like who can be involved, what the work means, what it entails. But at the core of your critique is the assertion that the sustainability class entirely overlooks wealth disparity and the class dynamics driven by capitalism. And so I think there's a question here just about, maybe you'll say a word about who is the sort of the people making the change. The people in general. This show, we cover quite a lot around indigenous struggles for sovereignty, eco-socialists, organizers and activists. I don't know what else, Josh. Who else do we talk to? Right?
Whoever will talk to us.
but give us a sense of how those struggles fit in, or those ideas fit in or don't fit in to the solutions. And what about the contradictions in the working class itself, right? I mean, we deal with issues of people who work in building trades doing work on pipelines. Not all sort of work comes equally has as many options for being environmentally in touch, or what we need really, or what we don't need. So I just wonder if you might say a word about that.
This question makes me realize that we actually didn't answer a previous question, which was, who is this book for? And I think this is maybe a good way to start with this new question. Yeah, we do come from like a leftist background, but we actually wrote this book in large part for people in the sustainability class. Like we hope that this could be a book that you could give someone who is like into environmentalism but doesn't really know where to go, and who is maybe middle class and has some free time and money. So this book is for them. And that's who we hope to reach. We also actually thought that we might be able to reach people who maybe are from a more working class background, who could even be considered to be conservative, and who recognize in this kind of fake environmentalism something is deeply wrong. But rather than taking them to rejecting doing anything about the environment at all, actually bringing them to a class-based politics, a solidarity-based politics. That was kind of our hope with the book. We'll see if that actually pans out that way.
Yeah, I think one thing, we spend some time in the book going through understanding what really is ecology. What does ecology mean? What is this fascination that we have with all things green? Where did that come from? So we talk about the history of that sort of logic, the conservation history as well, and the problems that unfolded as a result. But one of the main things that we emphasize is really something that, like, thinking from the perspective of the land, of the territory where we are. That sort of relational aspect, that focus on relationships, is really what ecology is about. And so we see that in what the Union de Vecinos in Boyle Heights is doing, just by paying attention to people's needs. And I think that's really where it comes down to, where we can bridge from indigenous perspectives to relationships to territory, all the way to working class struggles, is meeting people where they're at, understanding where people's struggles are, and organizing and building power over those struggles that people have. And that's how what we see with the sort of greening is, we don't see those relationships being built. We see them becoming individual, and becoming investment strategies, and becoming abstract ways to create new forms of commodities and new markets and things like that. So going back to ecology means going back to relationships. And I think when people, just thinking back about who the book is for, we know that there are a lot of people who belong to the sustainability class, we recognize ourselves in that class. We are sitting in a university right now. We're in a city. We do definitely recognize that we are part of that class. And so the point isn't to reject our position in that class, but to figure out new ways to become allies, rather than to further sort of close ourselves into our class privilege. So being part of the sustainability class, we argue in the book, means stepping outside of your class, being able to see where people are at, and be able to build relationships according to where people are at. And I think that's a world difference away from the straw-toting, tote bag holding, bike lane riding, Erewhon shopping person who is committed to that kind of more vibey or more focusing on innovation sort of strategy to sustainability.
Yeah, and in the book we do it's like, how do you show people who might not be familiar with it what solidarity looks like? So we try to go through different examples, and we argue that there's lots of different places you could end up in if you actually did want to do that kind of relationship based organizing. Definitely Indigenous struggles, being in allyship with Indigenous struggles. We give a good amount of examples in the book of different struggles happening around the world, but also workers' struggles. And we focus a lot on neighborhood struggles. And I just want to maybe say one thing around that is that we all live somewhere, and real estate is the biggest place where capital invests right now, like where capital makes its money is in real estate globally. And we see that in our cities, and we see that in how the places we live are being radically transformed and made policed more and made more exclusive. And we see that in our leaders. The real estate mogul in chief is now president. Housing is a really important place to do organizing, precisely that's where the power is, and that's where we actually have power to do something different, because that is where a lot of investment takes place. Yeah, that's strategically, I think, a great place to begin, because we all live somewhere, and we have a part in the book where we say the sustainability class might not know it, but in their own neighborhood, there is a thriving network of solidarity happening, and they might not know it, and they can definitely probably reach out and find it and build connections.
Maybe one final point of that we sort of draw on, and two related points. One is that mutual aid is really important, but at the same time, we need to also organize. We need to build power strategically, and we cannot be fighting fires all the time, because these fires are going to keep coming up. So we need to figure out ways to do both at the same time. And groups that are doing that are organizing and building that power, fighting on the ground, fighting as new struggles emerge, but at the same time are building that structural power. And so I think that's a key point, that we have to do both in a way.
Yeah, it was one thing that I really appreciated about the book was that you broadened, I think, the definition or understanding that most people have of what environmentalism encompasses. That it really isn't just about protecting biodiversity. Of course, that's one thing, right? But it's so much more. And if you live in an urban area in a city, there's a lot of environmental stuff that you can do. And like you say, housing is such a great place to insert your efforts.
Yeah, I was going to say one example we draw on in the book is this organization called Cooperation Jackson, who are in Jackson, Mississippi. And that's their slogan, is build and fight. And they've been really active now during the new Trump administration, saying we need to be building cooperatives. We need to be building different solidarity economy right here in Jackson, Mississippi, while we fight this autocratic and hugely powerful and proto-fascist regime. Yeah.
There was one other thing I just remembered that I wanted to mention, was this idea of co-optation. So one thing that the sustainability class does very well is they look at what leftists do, and they just sort of building and fighting, organizing, and they try to find new ways to recast that as though they're doing the same thing. Community is often a common way by which that takes place. So you often see, and we saw that in Venice, we saw that everywhere. We even went directly and asked, what do you mean by community? And it was never really clear. But the idea of connecting and building power is often co-opted in a term like community that becomes vacuous and doesn't have any meaning. And so I think one thing that we stress is that we have to expect this co-optation. We shouldn't be sitting back outraged. Oh, they used our term and now they're gaslighting us with, using this idea and it's doing the exact opposite of what we need to do, we have to expect that that's what they're going to do, because that's the only thing they know how to do. The market, the systems that are perpetuating ecological and social crises only know how to be vultures off of real value that is emerging from people. And so if we just expect them, we can continue doing our work and continue pushing for the building and fighting rather than spending so much time trying to just falling into that outrage loop. Yeah.
Vijay and Aaron, thank you so much for joining CounterPunch Radio. I was wondering if you could wrap up by telling listeners where they can follow your work, if you have any events coming up or anything like that.
Yeah, for those in the Baltimore and DC region, we have two book events, four book events coming up, and you can find that out by following either of us on Instagram or Blue Sky, or you'll find us if you.
We actually have an Instagram account called Sustainability Class. So if you search Sustainability Class, you will see it's sustainability_class, but it is we will post all of the book related events that we have, but also just some elements of the book as well and some imagery to capture what we try to describe as what the sustainability class is.
Yeah, just as a little taste, the latest post is this big green wall, a fake green wall that has a neon sign that says "It's all in your head" on it. And we also had a recent one, which is Brunch Day, Fun Day, we try to collect the aesthetics of the sustainability class on there.
Well, as long as you don't take my tote bag away.
I've got plenty.
The sustainability class, how to take back our future from Lifestyle Environmentalists. Go find it wherever you buy your books. If you're in the Chicago area, go to Pilsen Community Books, a co-op bookstore that Erik is a part of. And also, I believe they have it online. Go to your local library, request it so they can carry it, tell your friends about it. Thanks so much, guys, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks a lot for being with us. We appreciate it. Pick up the book.
Thanks so much, Josh and Erik. It's been really, really a pleasure.
Thank you.